Welcome to the Here We Go podcast, a place to share your experiences in football programs that players have loved regardless of record or on-the-field accolades. I'm Tom Letson with my co-host, Greg LaCava.
Morning. Welcome to the Here We Go podcast, episode 3, part 2, where we are continuing to get into the brain of Coach Letson and his defensive mind and how it works. Good morning, Coach. How you doing?
Coach LaCava, good morning. I really had a lot of fun in part 1, and I know as guys, listens to it, our colleagues and our ex-players, when you have discussions like this, a lot of memories come up, and you have different offshoots that happen, so sometimes it's hard to stay on topic. So we talked about a lot of things last podcast that are important to me in regards to how I developed defensively, and but also a lot of great little anecdotes and things that we did, as a team together, you and I, to build our culture, at the programs we've been at, where the kids would have special memories, So I'm really happy to get in today and to continue.
So as we discussed during the week, we're going to do a little shift in gears here. And rather than just focus on your defensive mind at work, we're going to discuss some of the memories you've had. Like you said, just to spark some memories in our ex-players and ex-coaches and give us the reasoning why, give the reason why these were memories in our head. And I'm sure there's going to be offshoots of that where I'm going to interject stuff because stuff will pop up into my head. So we're going to have more of a fun kind of a discussion today on all these memories that we've endured. Some were great, some were difficult, but let's get into I'm going to give you the floor and you can start with the memories that are important to you.
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking about this on doing a part 2, and there were a lot of course, if you coached a long time, you have a lot of great memories, of certain plays maybe, or, winning certain games or whatever. And of course they come into play, but there's these little snippets of things that happen, that some are funny, and some are just impactful, and I felt like I wanted to share some of that. And, and these are just the ones that came. I just was thinking about this morning, I was doing my morning routine. So these are the first things off the top of my mind. And I probably missed, I know I missed, many other ones. And I'm sure that they're going to come to light, and I hope to bring them up in another podcast. But let's get going on this.
All right.
So a really great memory about high school football that I have, where I was really blown away. And I can't remember who we were playing, but it was in my first year. And, and we were playing at the Swamp at Middletown, and it was raining. Okay. And the Swamp was the Swamp. You know what I mean? Like, it was muddy.
Yeah.
There was water. They called it the Swamp because the water would start to rise above the mud, right? And we would be standing in puddles on our sideline.
I played in that.
Yes. And so everybody kind of was standing in that, and you were a mess. But I just remember it was a close game at the end, and I don't know who we were playing. If it was Madawan, I'm not sure. But I just remember Keith Comerford, our head coach, he came up with a play that he wanted to run, towards the end of the game. And, we didn't have it in the script. He didn't even have it in the offense, I don't think. He got down on his knees, and all that the offense were looking down at him, and he was in the mud, and he was drawing in the mud. You know what I mean? About how we were going to run this play. And I just sat there watching it, and I was just blown away. And I go, wow, that is just so cool, that he's doing this, and the intensity of this and the rawness. And I just thought that, wow, here we are at this at a Group 4 school, and we're back at the schoolyard. We're back at the schoolyard drawing plays up, and sometimes we take this game, we make it too difficult, and sometimes it's real simple like that. But that memory really sticks out to me. It was so cool, Another memory I want to bring up, I mentioned briefly in another podcast, was our goal line stand against Madison Central when we won our first, Group 4 Central Jersey State title. And, we had gone. Yes.
I may have to correct you. Was it Trenton Central?
No, The first goal line stand.
That was
I'm
right.
gonna
So,
get I'm gonna get to Trenton Central, but the first
okay.
one was against Madison Central in '89, and
Yes. I didn't coach that year. I wasn't
yes.
there that year. Right.
So back then, as Coach Bova had mentioned, we were two platoon, and as you mentioned too, to your chagrin,
I
uh,
hated that.
I know, we were two platoons. So coaches that ever coached in two platoon know that you have the opportunity to put so many checks in. Okay,
Hmm.
I mean, for their goal line package, I probably had 10 checks. It was nuts,
Hmm.
but one check I had was to an unbalanced line that they would come into. And, out of the wishbone, okay, with their unbalanced, they would send both lead backs through and give it to the tailback and really create a mess at the point of attack with a lot of guys. So, in a gap situation where we had all our linemen down in our gaps, there was one extra gap now, okay, because of the unbalanced, right?
Hmm.
So, it was a check that when we recognized that the backside outside linebacker would run over and get down as a lineman in a 4-point stance in that open gap. And so, they came up on the ball and I started to recognize it. And I started to get so nervous because I'm like, oh no, they're going to score, because I don't know if we recognize it. And I'm yelling and yelling. And here's Coach Bova, the student of the game he is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He recognized it, and I can see him from this day, right today. We're sprinting and hustling right down the line, right behind all the defensive linebackers, and at the defensive line. And at the last moment, he gets down in a 4-point stance and he goal line charges through. They run in that gap. He spills the two lead blockers and makes the tackle for a
Hmm.
1 yard loss, and that was their last hurrah. And we went on to win the game 21-3. I believe that
Hmm.
was in the fourth quarter. It was definitely in the second half. That was a highlight. And that thrilling feeling that I had in watching what I put together on the board and having the players recognize it and run it to perfection at a critical time. I mean, that is just what it's all about. I love
Yeah.
it.
I obviously wasn't coaching there at that year, but talking to Coach Bova, in our golf games, all this stuff comes up. But you made a great point. Uh, Coach Bova was an outside backer, correct?
Yes.
Here's what I want to ask you, and I know the answer, but I think it needs to be mentioned. How did you get an outside backer who's on 2 feet the whole game to completely sacrifice himself and go down into a 4-point stance and play defensive end?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, those guys would do anything,
Right.
okay, anything, and that's part of when you have players that are all in, they're going to do what coach says and not question it. There's something that I said to the New Egypt players when we went to New Egypt, and I taped this, because of COVID. And I said, it's important that you do what we tell you to do.
Mhm.
We've been doing this for a long time and we know what we're doing. And I said, it may not make sense to you in your young mind, but there's a method to the madness. And when kids buy in like that, and then, Coach Bova, he was a football player, he mentioned that he had been playing football since he was 7.
Right.
And, you can't teach that charge. I can't remember if we practiced it at all, but, he went down. I believe he went down in a 4-point stance on his own. I think that we were just going to stunt that gap.
Right.
Okay. And he took upon his own and just took football savvy. So, yeah, it was a wonderful thing
Well,
to
well,
watch.
this is a testament to you and how your players feel about you because I've witnessed and we've coached guys that wouldn't do stuff. They would not do what we coached them to do. And obviously they were standing next to you on the sideline if they
Right.
didn't. But that also was, we had many players that did that.
Yeah.
You had many players that would sacrifice their whatever they believed in about their position, they would sacrifice for the team. Why do you think that happened with you? Because we were just discussing last episode the Thanksgiving Day game against two perennial shore conference teams where the defensive tackle kept getting driven and the coach said he won't do that. What do you think gave you the ability to get these kids to follow you and do what you coached them to do, what you wanted them to do, even though it was
Well,
out of the normal for them?
Well, I think that, the first thing is that, initially kids are a little standoffish with me, especially the younger ones, because of my intensity, right?
Right.
But that once they get to know me a little bit, okay, it's extremely close bond, that I have with them, and I tell them I'm out there with you. We're
Hmm.
kind of like, we're in the same platoon, we're in the same unit, and and when you develop that type of relationship, and Coach Bova mentioned it, in the letter that I read that he had written to me,
Hmm.
when he was a young man, freshman in college, after his experience at South, that said, your players would run through a wall for you. They take an oncoming train for you, and I felt that way about my coaches. And I just think it's that, it's really, loving these kids as human beings, man. Like they're players, and we love this game together, and we are in it for an important goal, and it's not just to win the game. Yes, that's the first goal, but it's to be the best that we can be,
Hmm.
and and then furthermore, like with the type of film study that we have, and walking the players through, and having them see it on film as to why this works, and them having an aha moment, and I remember, I remember, this is another memory. This is really cool. He'll like this. I remember Mike McGuire at Colts Neck, and Mike was, he was playing he was outside backer. We
Yeah.
moved to defensive end,
Yeah.
and he was not 100% sold on the cutting.
Right.
So, you know, so, but we were at a game at home. I'll never forget, and he was a big. I think they had a trade, so the tight end traded over to his size, much bigger kid than him, and so he knew what he was coached to cut this kid. So he started to go down on a 4 point, and then he stopped himself and he stood back up,
Right.
and then he's like, and then he went down and he cut the kid, and it was
Right.
beautiful. It was
Right.
beautiful. It was an important part of the play because when you trade the tight end, more than likely you're going to run that side.
Right.
And so I remember showing it on the film, in the film room with him. I'm
Yeah.
like, look at Mike. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to do it, And we all had a good laugh. And I go, he did it, and look what happened. And
Right.
it was a wonderful thing, man. And he was a really, really good player for us. And that's
He
just an
was.
example of a guy who was
He
coached by
bought in.
two different staffs.
He bought in.
Yep, and then he bought in. What a great guy,
Well,
and
well,
what a
here's
great
here's
player.
another caveat to that whole thing. And I think our players can attest to this. No player was more important than the team. So
No,
they knew if they wanted a chance to be on that field, they were going to do what we coached them to do and do what we asked them to do. So I think that's important because I think in my career, not I think I know, I've seen where the coach will not, will give in to the player because the player's a good
right.
player and let the kid do whatever he wants because he's a stud on the team. But that was
Yeah.
never the way we were gonna coach.
I remember this is bringing up some other stuff. It's hilarious. So there's times when, some players, which we know, very aggressive players, sometimes they just would have a hard time doing what they're supposed to do after the snap of the ball. But
Mhm.
really great kids running and hitting and impactful. So one of these kids was Tyrone Fay at Middletown South. Tyrone Fay,
Oh my
he
God.
played, he played,
130 fucking pounds that kid
he
was.
was a surfer,
Yep.
tough kid,
Yeah.
but 130 pounds, played outside linebacker, ran and hit like crazy.
Right.
But he would frustrate me sometimes, because he wouldn't line up where he's supposed to or something like that.
I
So
know. I
I,
remember him.
so I called timeout. I go out there. I didn't yell at him or anything, but I was stern. I go, Tyrone. I said, you lined up wrong again. I said, Tyrone, listen to this. Every player here, all 10 of these guys has say over you. Any one of these guys tells you to do something,
Yeah.
I go, you listen to them. They're one of your coaches. You get it? He goes, I got a coach. I said, okay. I go, fellas, make sure Tyrone's in the right spot.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah,
Tyrone, man. What a
he was
free
great.
he was a free spirited kid.
And that was an exclamation point on that one. But I've done that a couple of times in my career
Right. You
where I,
had to. You
yeah,
had
like,
to.
listen, I said, you got to listen to him. He's
Yeah.
going to
I
tell
mean,
you, okay?
We had a great two-way player, one of my favorite, if not the favorite player I ever coached at Colts Neck, who our quarterback had to tell him what to do every play.
Yep.
Every play,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know?
We,
I'm
we've had,
like,
look, we had some of that at New Egypt. We had
I
some of that
know.
at Allentown. I
I
mean,
remember saying, I'm like, listen to Mike. He'll tell you exactly what to do.
yep.
And that worked for him. He didn't have
And
to
these
think.
and these players, man, what a godsend these cerebral players are
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah.
who are coaches on the field, and oh, what a great feeling it is for us when they're out there.
Yeah.
And they know they could the bottom line is there's some kids that could coach with us when they're in high school. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? After they
Hmm.
after they learned how we did it and became experienced. And that's a beautiful thing.
All right. Give us another one that you got.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was good. All right. So one of my favorite things, back when I was at South, you know, Coach Amabil at Neptune. Neptune was always such a tough game, and they
I
were a
know.
threat, very threat. And Coach Amabil was very experienced, as we know. Coach Sprengel was one of his players at Wall. Coach Amabil went on. Coach. I hope Coach Sprengel listens to this. I hope I get this right. I think they had a 33 game winning streak at Wall,
Yeah.
and Coach Sprengel was part of that. And so I have a lot of respect for Coach Amable. But if you ever watch Coach Amable, he was a nut job on the sideline. Like he was a literal nut job on the
Right.
sideline.
Yeah.
So, and he would lose control often. And so one of our goals defensively, okay, was to give him such fits. Coach Amable used to wear hats, okay? And one hat he used to wear, one year, he used to wear this wool hat that he had rolled up, this wool hat, and if he got really upset, he'd throw the hat. So our goal, okay, was to get Coach Anvil to throw his hat. And so this one game at South, this was in '88. I don't know who ran it, but we had a certain stunt in. He had this weak side dive that he would run out of a certain formation, and it was a 4th and 2, and around midfield, and he decided to go for it. Okay, and I saw the formation. I knew it was coming, and I had a backer stunt called in that B gap where he was going to run that. And so, I got the word in, and we ran the stunt, and I go to the kid next to me. I wish I could remember who's standing next to me.
Yeah.
I go watch Coach Amiable after this play. And so, sure enough, man, we run the stunt, we blast through, we tackle the back, exact play I knew was coming for a loss. Coach Amiable on cue, he takes his hat off and he throws it. The kids on the sideline lost it. They couldn't
Yeah.
believe it.
That's great.
So yeah,
We
that was a really fun memory.
we had battles with Coach
Oh,
Amabile,
we had
battles against him back in
we
the
had
80s, early 90s,
we
you
had
know.
battles with him, and what such great players. And another memory I have, and I think coaches will appreciate this, was with our great nose guard linebacker Glenn Pritzlaff, who went on to win a NCAA Division I wrestling championship at Penn State.
Yep.
And he was a undersized nose guard, about 5'8" or he might have been 160 or 165, something
Yep.
like that. But he was unblockable and a tougher kid you never met. Quickness was crazy. And so he was all sure when he was a junior,
Junior, yeah.
and that's when he stopped playing. But what a player! And he didn't come out his senior year, which I understood, to focus on that great wrestling career, and we missed him for sure. But Glenn is such a competitor, and he would take everything to heart. And I meant this. We had this thing where it's like, fellas, this is football, and as Coach Bova mentioned in one of the other podcasts, this is a violent game. Like we're hitting the other guy. Don't be nice.
Mhm.
And I would tell my players, I'm like, listen, we want to maintain this attitude throughout the game. We're not going to foul or anything like that, but don't help the opposing player up off the field. Let their own teammates help them. I said, number one, we're not helping them. Okay. We're trying to hurt them. We're trying to hurt them physically to win the game, not maim them or anything, but, we're hitting, and so, and also we want them to get tired. We don't want to give them a lift. Okay. And make it easier for them to get off the field, make them get up off the field, make them use their own energy. Right. So I said, has nothing to do with not being a nice guy. We'll be nice guys after the game. I said, just don't help them up. So Glenn took this to heart, and we were playing, in 90, in 92. Neptune had a very good team, and they were number 2 when we played them in the middle of the season. We were number 1. They had Scott Harley,
Yeah.
was a Division I running back.
Yeah.
He might have led the Shore in rushing that year. He went to East Carolina State, I
He
think.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, he was tough. He was big and fast, and he was tough. We knew it was going to be a challenge. Well, Glenn was always up for a challenge, and I will never forget. It was right there on film because Channel 34 or whatever the station was filming it, and so Glenn, there was a attack. Scott Harley was on his back. He reached up to Glenn, and Glenn looked down on him and just turned his back and walked away. I'll never forget. We saw that on the TV film.
Right.
We were dying. But it had nothing about him. Glenn was just a competitor. Like he was going to give you a crumb if
Right.
he was competing against you. So
Listen, hold on. I want to interject something else about
yeah,
Glenn Pritzlaff, and I'm sure you're going to remember this when I tell you. I can't remember the team, but I remember the center snapped the ball slow,
yes,
and Glenn was playing those. And I think all week you were trying to tell him if you can anticipate that snap, try to swipe the ball from the center. And I could vividly remember on film,
yes.
he either touched it or got close, and he jumped up and was looking at you. I can get it. And he spent the whole game trying to swipe that center
Yeah.
snap.
So this is very interesting. So Glenn will remember this if he listens to it, and it's unbelievable. So we lost to Edison in the state playoffs, 20-16, the state final,
Mhm.
and they were much bigger than us, and we did a great job. But on their goal line, we were holding them, and on the score that won the game for them, Glenn did that exact thing. So he gets through A gap quickly. He gets the quarterback's ankles.
Mhm.
And because this quarterback, we picked up on film, every time he got the snap, he had this thing. He'd take a step forward.
Right.
So he would step to us when he got the snap. It's a weird thing this kid did.
Mhm.
So he stepped, and Glenn hooked his ankle. The kid is falling. They ran a power play, and he ended up falling flat on his face. But to
He
his
handed it
credit,
off.
was able to hand it off to the kid. Okay, and he scored the winning touchdown. I will never forget that.
Yeah.
I want to share another story about Glenn Pritzlaff because this intensity is just crazy. And I think coaches will appreciate this, and the players will too. I mean, with Glenn being so intense in '92, he was nose guard, and we had another player, Kenny Arovich, and Kenny is a great reason to hang in there, guys. To hang
Yeah.
in there. Kenny never thought he was going to play, and he's very slow, big guy, little overweight, and but he hung in there. And we needed him when he was a senior, and he developed. Okay, he
Yeah.
wasn't fast, but he listened, and he played defensive tackle the way we needed him, which just don't get moved, make piles. We don't care about a pass rush. We just need you to do your job on the line of scrimmage. So he did a good job. So we're playing Middletown North, and on Thanksgiving, and
And all
the
these
kids,
kids know each other, so
all
they're all
these
from the
kids
same
know each
thing.
other, and the kids had heard that. So the North kids said that they were going to target Kenny. They felt that he wasn't a good player, and they were going to run at him. And this offended Glenn, his loyalty, okay, to the guy that lined up next to him in the trenches all year long. This offended him so much. He was so fired up during practice all week. And you should have seen them walk out together. It was like Mutt and Jeff. They used to walk out holding hands.
Yep.
We used to hold hands. And
Yeah.
so Kenny was probably, I don't know, 5'11", 270, 6 foot, 270. Glenn being 5'8", 160, walking out holding hands. It was a sight to see, right?
Right.
But now here's Glenn before every snap. Glenn's at nose, and he's up in a 2-point stance. And before he gets down, he's in Kenny's ear, and he's bending over. He's like, Kenny, they said you couldn't play, Kenny. They said you couldn't play. And you could see Kenny going, Kenny's shaking with anger, And
Oh
so,
my God.
so Kenny had a really good game. Well, the reason I'm telling you this story is because I never had this happen before. Glenn was such an intense competitor. We were up 34-9 or 34-0. I don't remember. It's in the fourth quarter. And the official came over to me and said, Coach, he wasn't angry. He goes, Coach, please, you guys are up by 34 points. Can you please tell number 17 to stop?
Right.
Right. And I
He
go,
wasn't talking to the other team.
no.
He was talking to his teammate.
I go, what's he doing? He goes, he's just telling, your players just to continue just to, whatever he said. And I go, he's competing. I said, I'll have a talk with him or whatever. I didn't have a talk with him, but
Hmm.
I'll never forget the official come over. It's just like, you can tell him you can tell him it's over now. You can tell him
Right.
to stop. I'm like,
Right.
you tell this frigging guy,
Right.
this competitor to stop. You know what I mean? I'm never going to tell a player to stop. Like he wasn't disrespecting it. He was
No.
pumping up his teammates. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Agreed.
So all right. So with Glenn, so that was really good stuff. You know what I mean? Um, Let me see. All right. So I want to get to Allentown, and and we talked about the last podcast having to do the quest. We were always looking for a mental edge because we were so physically outmatched in size and speed, and and being in a conference that we just couldn't compete as a group two with groups threes and fours. We just didn't have the ability. So we came up with Coach Massari, who was an ex-Marine and was wounded in Vietnam. He came on our staff and, and,
Yep.
and he introduced us to these boot camp workouts that he used to do. And so we incorporated them into practice, and I like doing them with the kids. So we used to do them in practice as part of our conditioning. And then I got the idea that, hey, how about a mental edge? We'll do them after the game. You know what I mean? So the game's done, and before we go in, we're going to do them after the game. And the reason was to just so we could start to feel like, hey, we just went through a tough game. You're going to walk in, okay, and we're going to be out here and we're going to do boot camps. Now that probably wasn't that wise, with the kids after the game and being banged up and stuff like that. We didn't do it for too long. 10, I don't even know, 10 minutes,
Yeah.
five,
I don't
seven,
think it. Yeah.
5, 7 minutes, but still it was intense, because boot camps involved, push-ups and sit-ups, and stars. What else where you would go, so you would squat down and jump up and do
Yeah.
stars.
Yeah.
Um, and running in mountain climbers,
Mountain
running
climbers.
up downs.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh,
It was
so
brutal.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
brutal. So I always remember, the look, on the other team's face where they were walking off and they were looking. We would circle up on our
Yeah.
side of the
Coaches
field,
in the middle.
coaches in the middle, and we would do these boot camps. And I'll never forget the look on the other team's faces when we used to do that.
Well, this is one of those things that I think this can be something worthwhile for coaches that are in programs that are, can't compete physically or talent wise. We were always looking for something to give us an identity.
Yep.
First of all, we always had the us against the world mentality, and that started at Allentown. We had it. We
Yeah.
had to have the us against the world mentality because Allentown was looked at as the doormat of the CVC, and you're dealing with high school kids, and that was I used to get offended because I'm like, these are high school kids here,
Yep.
and nobody cares about their mental, emotional well-being. Not that
Right.
I'm that big into that, because I'm the opposite way, like suck it up but not when we were in those battles every week,
Yeah.
seeing our kids just physically get manhandled, we needed an identity. And our identity, and we built that at Allentown first, was we may not win this game. And first of all, you should be embarrassed that you're playing us because we're so small. We shouldn't even be on the field. We're playing group threes and group four schools, and we have 20, 25 kids on the roster as a group. We could have been a group one school player wise. So that was the first thing that used to piss me off. So we got that. We built toughness, and those kids, man, we touched on some of these guys, undersized kids that were
Oh,
tough
yeah.
as nails. But I think that when you're in a situation, it forced us to give our kids some sort of identity. And then they would run with that identity and they would freaking do anything we asked them to do
Yeah.
because we took that identity on as coaches as well. It
Yeah.
was us against the rest of the CVC. It was us against, anyone that we were playing. And we were tough as coaches, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And we wanted our kids to be the
Yeah.
same way. And we built those. We definitely did build those types of programs. I mean, everyone that saw us play couldn't believe that we're lining up against these teams and we're freaking hitting like maniacs, and
Yeah.
playing for 48 minutes.
Absolutely. And this is where we talked about coaches checking out and that
Hmm.
you're doing a disservice not only to yourself, you're doing a disservice to the kids. This
Right.
is this is their life. This is their lifetime memory. You know what I mean? And and I hate when guys say moral victories or whatever. This is a freaking fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is a freaking fight. We're gonna get our licks in. You know what I mean? And,
But
we may go. I always used to say this. You know what I mean? And now I'm thinking about it. And I always used to tell the players this. If we lose this game, I want them to have a difficult time getting out of their seat the next day. So when
mhm.
they get up from, I used to tell the kids, when they get up from their dinner table the next day, I want them to go, oh,
Yep.
you know, and then I want them to know that they were in a freaking fight. You know what I mean?
So, so the point is that when you're struggling in the wins and losses department or competing, find something that gives your team a something to grab onto.
Yeah,
Find some kind of identity, because what when you're outmatched. I can remember every week at Allentown being like, oh my God, when I would see the other team, I'm like, and I'm saying this to myself, we have no chance. So what are we going to do here? And
yeah,
it was more about teaching these kids when everything's against you, just keep plugging away. And this is why we took care of our players. And I know you're going to bring up something that happened at Allentown
yeah.
because our players were more important than playing a game or wins and losses at
Yeah,
that point.
I think in hearing you talk, that this is a very interesting thing. I just thought about this, and I think that this is the difference sometimes. So when we were in some of these games that we were outmatched and we knew we weren't going to win,
Right.
rather than cashing in or yelling at kids, you were me too. We were coaching them.
Right.
It was like we were at practice.
Nonstop.
It was
Yeah.
like we were at practice. We're saying, okay, like see how this happened. Next time when you go in,
Yep.
this is who you should block, or this is we want it to work this way. Like the teaching didn't stop, even though it could have been 35-0.
Right.
And the teaching didn't stop because we didn't want to waste that opportunity, with live competition for our kids to get better.
And
You
I
know,
also think we also didn't never want our kids to think we quit.
right,
Like no matter what the score was, we're not quitting. We are
right,
going to freaking play for 48 minutes, no matter what the score is. We're going to coach you up. We're going to, we're going to tell you when you're doing great stuff. But we're going to coach you for 48 minutes. And that's why those games, and after those games, man, we were freaking destroyed
oh yeah,
physically. Like
yeah,
like physically just worn down because we never stopped coaching because we couldn't stop
right.
coaching.
So this brings up one of the memories that I was going to talk about, and we'll talk about it now, okay? Which was, all the players will remember, and it was an unfortunate situation where we had a discussion, and you as the head coach, went to our trainer Brian, okay, and our athletic director, and said, we had I forget who we played, but
Can't remember.
we had a very tough game, and we had 24 players on the roster, okay, total. And we didn't have a JV schedule. All right. So we had a number of players who had not set foot on the field yet,
Mhm.
okay, during that year. Okay. They were JV players that hadn't played. And, after this particular game, we had six starters, six out of the 24, okay, which
Who played both sides of the ball.
right, who played both sides, were injured and could not practice on Thursday. We did not know moving forward how many of those kids were going to be able to play for our Saturday game.
Right.
So the issue was we were playing, a Group 4 school that was 8-0. Okay, who was it? Are we going to
Steiner.
name Steiner?
Steiner.
That's right. Steiner was 8-0, and they had a great team.
And
And
they had like 75 players on the
and
sideline.
obviously they're much bigger than us. And so it was a concern. And we started talking about, like, we were looking at who would have to go out there. And we're like, someone could seriously get hurt.
Right.
Like, we can't do this. Like this, we can't do it. And so, you went, and why don't you take it from there? I mean,
Well, I had to go to the administration, obviously. I mean, the trainer, Brian Irwin, who was really
yeah,
good trainer and supported us, and Dan Vinay, obviously, awesome. No, actually, it was Brian may have been the AD by that point. Dan may have retired, but
okay.
I had to go to the administration. And, was what year? Do you remember what year that was? Three? Was that year three there?
It wasn't the last year, I don't believe.
So maybe it was year three.
It might have been,
And
yeah, 3 or 4. It might have been 4.
okay, so year four, and I had so many battles with administration at that point, trying to put our kids in a in the chance to be competitive. Like I had battles against them, and they saw us as a doormat as well, and I wouldn't accept that. So I had to go to them, and I remember they were like, "You can't do that. You have to play this game." And I remember saying, "We are not playing this game." So, and I walked out. Yada yada yada. We forfeit. Then the shit hit the fan. Then I get the calls from the Steiner's head coach. Then he goes in the paper and bashes us that we
Yeah.
didn't play. Like this
And
guy
I
was,
bash him. I
yeah,
bashed
was
him on the internet.
8-0 and wanted another game against little old Allentown that had 18 players that we can actually put on the field, and two-thirds of them never stepped on the field.
Right. And you know what this guy says? This guy says, "Oh, we wouldn't do that." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like,
Right.
what do you mean? Are your kids going to kneel down and not hit our kids? Like, what are you
Right.
talking about? We wouldn't do that. We're not saying you're going to run the score up or anything like that. We are physically concerned for our kids. One of our kids could really get hurt. One of our little kids that have not stepped on the field yet this year, and they're going to go up against this team. You know,
Here's the point. I hated the CVC and they hated me, and I loved it because these guys. So throughout that whole time, I was always trying to figure out ways how this is an unfair competitive advantage. This is not right. And their excuse was we don't have enough teams. So eventually, 2 or 3 years in, they let us go out and get a couple of teams off the CVC schedule that we could try to compete with. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I put together an entire plan that this has to be changed. You can't have teams that are group two schools playing group three and group four schools. No one cared back then.
we
They
didn't
were
even
just,
play Group Two schools.
I
Well, as
know, they were just filling their schedule because the CVC maybe had 15 or 12 teams at that time. So we were screwed. Our schedule was our schedule, and they just happened to be all group threes and group fours. And Notre Dame, a parochial powerhouse at that point. And I remember having these battles. And listen, that was one of the reasons why I left, because by my fourth year, the administration hated me and I hated them,
yeah,
because I was looking out for the well-being of our program, our 30 kids that busted their ass every day and, up
yeah.
against immeasurable, you couldn't even compete. So yeah, so the CVC, and I remember that, and I was so freaking angry that Steiner had the balls to call us out in the newspaper. I was like, "You got to be kidding me! Did you
Yeah.
see what we have on the sideline? You got 75 kids on your team. We have 18
Yeah.
dressed."
Yeah. I mean, like we said, most of the guys we got up against were really fine guys,
Hmm.
like 90% of them, very fine guys, fine men, you know what I mean? Fine coaches, competitiveness aside,
Here's my
fine guys.
mentality. If the roles are reversed, I'd be like, "That's great. That's a week off for our kids. We don't need to go there and just show
Do,
up to play a game
do what
to
do
get
what you got to
stats
do. Yeah.
for our players." I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I agree with this
Yeah.
guy. Why play this game?
Yeah.
It was
So
a big controversy.
So I want to give you props for that as a young man. Like that was a very difficult, pill to swallow and to do. We also had to tell the parents and the players, and
Yeah,
and they understood, and we were surprised that the players really, they trusted us. You know what I
right.
mean? And they trusted you, and they knew that to make a decision like this, they knew it was in the program's best interest, and we wouldn't have done it if we didn't really feel it was necessary.
Of
So
course.
I don't know how many coaches have ever done that, but you deserve a lot of credit for taking that hit because look, football has a lot to do with ego, and we know
Right.
that. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so stepping down, in a moment like that takes a lot of freaking guts because I know a lot of lesser men who would have put kids in harm's way because they wouldn't have wanted dealt with that ego blow. So
Right.
good for you.
Yeah. That was tough, but I think we learned a lot
We did.
at Allentown in regards to ego, playing coaching with ego. I don't think you can.
No.
When you're in those situations, you can stay true to what you believe, but ego has to be completely taken out of the picture. You know.
Oh, absolutely. So let me get back to my list here, and we'll go to Allentown because there's one. I wanted to say this one about Pat Swall. You had mentioned Pat Swall. in the last podcast.
Oh,
And
kid
Pat
was
was
unbelievable.
5'5", 135, fast, closing speed, great form, tackler. Like he would get into your body and take you down. I think he was a wrestler too. I mean, he was strong, so, but anyway, Pat was such a competitor. I'll never forget, he had a bad shoulder. And so, this one game, they couldn't block him. So I kept sending him off the corner from an outside linebacker position, right? And so then I had a big back in there or whatever. He was getting blocked sometimes, and his shoulder popped out, right? And it popped out maybe twice, And so Brian Irwin was a trainer at the time, finds me on the sideline. He goes, Coach, Swall's shoulder, came out, we got to watch him. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you think I should keep sending him off the side, stunning him off the corner? And he goes, no, you should probably not do that, so you can avoid that type of impact. I go, okay, no problem. I go, Pat, I called him over. Pat, come on over. I got to tell you something. He goes, yeah, what's up, Coach? He goes, listen, Pat, I'm going to stop sending you off the corner. And he looks up at me because I was taller than him. He's short. Right. He goes, why?
Dude, not only was he a stud at he was our starting tailback.
I know.
He was our starting tailback. Kid never came off the field.
I'll never forget him going, why?
Now this is one of those things why when I tell coaches these stories, they can't believe it. Like the Quest and all the boot camps. We had to do this stuff because we had every kid playing offense, defense, and special teams. They never came off the field. Never came off the field.
Yeah, no. It was great. It was great. All right, let me get to some other ones here because they're good. All right, I'm going to go back to South a little bit, the goal line stand. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the goal line stand in 90 against Trenton Central, okay, when it was 15-14 in the clock in the fourth quarter, ticking down, and them having first down on the 5-yard line, okay, with the state title on the line. And they were being much bigger and faster than us. They had a number of Group One scholarships.
Division One.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Division One scholarships. I know one kid, a huge offensive lineman, went to Rutgers. Their quarterback went to West Virginia. It was nuts. So anyway, we had a big size disadvantage. And so, but the kids, we were quick on goal line, and we had a good scheme. And so, we got to where it was fourth down now. Okay. And I will never forget this as long as I live. Okay. It's fourth down, and they break the huddle, and they start to go up to the line, and our players are pacing, and they are slamming their helmets. They are looking at Trent. They're going boom, 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 boom. And the coach sees this and he calls timeout. He goes, timeout, timeout. He knew he was not gonna. He should have.
Well, he ran 3 times inside at that point.
Right, and he was going to do it again.
Yes, he was.
And he knew it wasn't going to make it. So he calls timeout, and the place went nuts. I went nuts. I sprinted, full sprint.
You can find, for our watchers, you can find this on YouTube, by the way.
And I knew when they called timeout, they were toast. And I go, they're done. They're done. They're finished, and I got in there, and it was the feeling was unbelievable. And
what did they try to do on that fourth down after the timeout?
To this day, I'll never know why a team would do this, but they packed us all in their double tight. And they put the ball in their best athlete's hands, which is great. But what they tried to do was just do a naked fake, naked boot fake with no blockers, and it was a muddy surface. And so Robert Pitts, Robert came down and he was a middle linebacker with Pete Ellabrook on the goal line. And Robert came down right before the snap and stood on the line of scrimmage outside the defensive end and was right there. And Robert Pitts was 6'4".
Right.
You know what I mean? So the kid sees Robert, and anybody that saw Robert Pitts that close, I mean, they crapped their pants. You know what I mean? Like he was a very, imposing type of player. And the kid tried to do his juking, and he slipped in the mud, and Robert pancaked him, fell right on top of him. That was the end of the game. That was the end of the series.
The point is that your defensive techniques, your route technique and all that stuff is what forced them because they knew they weren't getting in there running straight,
Yeah,
inside. So they tried to go outside and lost the game.
they would have scored, and they would have scored. And with the route technique, being in the gaps, 4-point stance in the gaps, and with the goal with the players, coaches know this to establish a new line of scrimmage. But you want to see, and I used to tell the players, and if you guys watch this, I'll post this on our
Yeah,
Instagram.
post it because it's
Yeah,
awesome to
I
watch.
will. You will see the helmets of the kids, okay,
Popping through.
coming through that gap. And when you see helmets, offensive linemen, falling down and those helmets coming up, okay, from the bottom of the earth, these helmets pop up.
All
You
right.
know that they're doing the right
Well,
technique.
why don't you explain your route technique? Because this is something a lot of coaches have a hard time doing because they think they're giving people up. Explain your route technique because it's used anywhere on the field, not just goal line.
Right. So there's two techniques down the goal line for me are a charge technique and a route
Mhm.
technique. Okay.
Mhm.
So so a charge is where a kid is in a 4-point stance and tries to maintain that 4-point stance, okay, and blasting into their key, whether they're in the shade or in the gap, but it's mostly on a shade.
Mhm.
Okay, so they are going to attempt to deny, okay, forward momentum by the offensive lineman above them, in front of them, or they're going to be in a better position immediately to create a pile on a double team down there in a goal line charge. But they're not in a goal line charge. They don't have to be giving themselves up. They're still in a 4-point crawl, not 6-point crawl. 4-point crawl. So, if it's a pass or if it's a rollout or if it's a counter or something like that, they're still in a position. They didn't give themselves up totally. They can kind of maybe get up. A route's different. A route's where there's really, there's a yard and you really are giving yourself up. Okay. It's not a 4-point spring. Okay. You're more or less in a 6-point, okay, under your toes. Okay. And you are first springing and diving low. Okay. And you're going to bring up earth. Okay. So your belly should be on the ground as you're springing through that gap on gapper. Okay. And then you're going to crawl, then you're going to try to grab anything you can to go forward. Our goal is to spring forward. Okay. And yeah, I actually got the route technique. I forget what I used to call it, but I got to credit Coach Wilbur because Coach Wilbur, when I was coaching with him at Rumson for 2 years, he came up, you're digging roots. I go, Coach, I love that root,
Mhm.
the root tech, so
Mhm.
you're digging for roots. And this is what kids do, so, and look, that could be the difference between stopping a team and then winning the game. You know what
Well,
I
you
mean?
you see it all the time on
Yeah.
in high school and even in college and the pros where these D linemen, I know it's different. I know they're paid to do one thing,
Yeah.
but these D linemen getting driven off the line of scrimmage in a short yard situation. I mean,
Yeah.
they won't, that's not the mentality. But in high school, anything that gives you an advantage needs to be considered and well thought out. And I think because of your creative mind and your mentality as a defensive coach, it created many unorthodox things, but they work, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I don't know how unorthodox this is. I think other coaches do it, but they just don't do it enough or they don't
That's what I'm
trust it.
saying. Right.
I don't know. I don't know why,
That's
but
their last resort.
right.
That's your
Yeah.
first principle. You know what I'm
I mean,
saying?
look, like we've rooted, like like Coach Bova mentioned this. If it's 4th and 1 in the middle of the field,
Hmm.
I'm going to call a gapper route depending on
Hmm.
the situation of the game. And we had a very critical, we were playing Ocean in '93. They had 11-0 team, and that was our last year at South. And Coach Conti, it was a close game. They had the lead at halftime, and I'll never forget this. They got the ball in the second half, and they drove to midfield, and we had them stopped. It was 4th and 2 or 4th and 1, and and Coach Conti Coach Conti went for it on 4th down. I couldn't believe it. I kind of felt a little disrespected that he's going to do that. At 4, I'm like, Coach, you really going to go for this on the 45? On your own 45? It was like, but good for him, man. What a competitor that man is. I love that guy. And so I ran a goal line defense. We stopped him. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, and listen, it's risky running goal line defense there. We know there's no pass rush. There's no pass
Nothing.
rush in goal line
Yeah.
defense.
Yeah.
So So yeah, I mean, but one of the funnest things to do is practice that technique during practice. Okay, is to practice the root technique, and kids don't get it at first.
Yeah,
It's such
I
a
was just going to say it
fun
took
drill.
so long. I mean, I can remember standing behind them.
Yeah,
That's not right. That's
that's
not
right.
right. That's not
Get
right.
down, get
Yeah,
down,
dude,
get
oh my
down.
God.
You know,
Because it's
and
so
and then
unnatural.
I always love this, and I'll take credit for this because this is where you have fun. Like when a kid got it,
Yeah. It
and
was the biggest thing in the world.
I would call it a Rembrandt. That's a
Yeah.
Picasso. Remember during film review, I go,
Yeah.
that's a Rembrandt right there.
Yeah.
That's perfect technique. That's perfect. And whenever a kid got it and it was perfect, I loved it. It was
Yeah.
a great moment for all of us. You know
That
what I
was
mean?
awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So continue on your list.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna go to Colts Neck, which I feel, and you might agree, which was a turning point for us in our culture, and where the program was going to go in a certain direction.
Right.
And that was, in 2010, we were coming together our second year. And we were having a difficult year. We were playing good defense. It was hard for us to score points. We were getting better as the year went on,
Mhm.
and we were playing the eventual Group Three Central Jersey Group Three state champion in Freehold Borough. Okay, and I believe they might have been the defending champions as well. I'm not sure, or at least they had gone to the state final the year before. And Coach Ciccatelli, an excellent shore coach, we all know him, Mark Ciccatelli, was their coach. And we felt we had a good scheme. I was going to play something different against what he ran. A 53, which he wasn't used to seeing, a TNT, and it was very effective. And so, I'll never forget this. On our sideline, I believe it was in the second half, and they had beaten us. You remember the year before, it was a Thanksgiving Day game, and they embarrassed us at their
Yeah.
place.
Yes.
Okay, it was 34-0, and they just ran all over us. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
was it was hard. It was a tough, difficult game for
Yeah.
us, and I
Yeah.
remembered that. But I had that memory, and here, like, all of a sudden, so he's going to go for it. It's around, I think he was on his 45 or our 45 going in, and it was in the second half, and it was 7-7. And so he was going to go for it. And I was ready. We called goal line. And
Mhm.
guess what? He wasn't going to get it.
Right.
So I'll never forget Matt Kemp, Gio, okay, Mark Kapnick, these guys, they're on the ground. Matt Kemp, as big as he was, they're pounding the turf.
Hmm.
They're pointing at their huddle. They're, come on, boom, pounding the turf. Coach Ciccatelli sees it. Timeout.
Right.
They
Right.
punt.
Right.
They punt the ball. You
Hmm.
know, and so at that point, we had two wins. No, we didn't even have two wins. I think we had one win at that
Yeah,
point.
we may have had one. We were
You
two
know,
and eight that year, but we were turning the corner.
and we took them to overtime. And we scored first, but then we missed. I don't know what happened. They won. It is what it is. But that I think that was a feeling when they did that, and you were in disbelief. I'll never forget. You go like this, Greg. You say this a lot. You're like, can you believe this? That's what you say.
Yeah.
You're like, look at this. Can you believe this? And
Yeah.
I knew Colts Neck, our program was born. Our pro,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
you know,
And I believe Matt Kemp was a sophomore that year.
in 2010, he
No,
might
he
have
was
been
he was a junior. He
he was
was
a
a junior.
junior. He was a junior.
He graduated in 2012, I think.
Great player.
Yeah.
Great,
I mean
great
that,
player.
we our first year we were 3-7. Unfortunately, we were fighting the mentality of the previous staff, and the players had a different mentality. 2010, we played a
A
lot of
lot of
sophomores
sophomores.
that year. We were 2-8, and I remember the Asbury Park press saying we were the best 2-8 team that
Yeah.
they've seen,
Yeah.
and we couldn't get over the hump. I think we lost 6 games by a total of 26 points that year,
Yeah. We had a lot of close games, and
playing with mostly sophomores. Then those
yeah.
guys became juniors, and we were 6-4 and missed the playoffs again. But that was a huge turnaround from 2-8 to 6-4. Statistically, how offensively we were able, I think we almost were, if I recall, because I did some research on this years ago, that our point differential, what we gave up and what we scored, was almost equal in 2011 when we were 6-4. We
Right.
were we were skewed the opposite way. We had a hard time scoring our first 2 seasons there. And then in 2011, 6-4 year, it was like 186, 186. We didn't score a lot, but we didn't give up a lot. And
Right.
then the 2 years after that, we were,
Yeah.
we were scoring points and stopping people like crazy.
Yeah.
But, we didn't play a lot. I want to touch on this because we've made point of this, that coaches are like, forget about their upperclassmen because they have a better sophomore. We didn't do that.
Oh no.
That wasn't what we did. We are the best players were going to play, and they just happened to be that sophomore class had some of the best.
Yeah. I
Excuse me,
mean,
had
look,
some of the best players.
I'll share my philosophy, what I used to tell the kids all the time, and I still believe this. Look, we've been on a lot of teams where juniors have not played varsity, and
Hmm.
they considered like maybe quitting.
Hmm.
And say, look, like don't quit. Don't quit. Hang in there.
Right.
And this is the reason. Like, and I think many coaches feel this way. I want as many seniors, 18-year-old men on the field, okay, than boys. I'd
Right.
rather have 18-year-old seniors on the field, men, than 16-year-old boys. So my preference is to have those older, stronger, more experienced, okay, men on the field. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, some seasons, some sophomores have to play.
Right.
But you know, I always said that to kids. And if I ever coach again, I'll say it again. Like, I want the 18-year-old men on the field. That's what I
Right.
want.
Right. Right. But that year, our 18-year-old men weren't as good as our 16-year-old boys.
True.
And that
True.
that that was a special class, that sophomore class.
Oh, oh
They
yeah.
played way beyond their years. You know, they were
Yeah.
only sophomores. All
You
right.
talk about being all in. They were all in.
Yeah, yeah, we had
They
them by 2011. We had everyone. They were on board.
Yep.
They were on board, and I think they saw it. But they also saw our consistency and how we treated them, and
Oh yeah.
what we believed in.
Yeah.
And
Program.
again, like we touched on in our intro podcast, high school coaches' number one job is to be role models for the young men they coach, above and beyond all
Yeah.
else.
Why wouldn't you want to be? You know what
Well,
I mean?
that's a question I've always asked myself. Why won't these coaches, why don't they feel that that's the most important thing? Not all of them, but there are
Right.
some that it's about them,
Oh
you
no,
know?
there's no
It's
question
about
about
them. And that's why, you talk about ego. A lot of these guys get caught up in their own ego because they won't do something that makes them look bad, or not knowledgeable. Like we did so much crazy shit out of desperation
it. Right.
that was so, I mean, like people would look at, here's an example. Playing Neptune with a three-man defensive line
Yeah.
because we wanted to stop that QB from throwing the ball
Yes.
and running all over. Explain your philosophy, because I made note of that. You've done that many times
Yeah.
where you're
So
going to take away their shit and it's going to look ridiculous, but it freaking works. So go ahead.
right. So we did it 2 years in a row. Okay. So
Yep.
you're referencing 2010, but let me at their place. Let me go to our place at 2011. Okay, with the
Yep.
playoffs on the line. And
Yes.
this is where we talked about ego and where I felt the game plan. People were going to question the game plan. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right.
But I knew football, and I know players, and I know speed, and I know that we did not have the speed, and
Right.
I did not want to make these long touchdown games and have us get down. So they had a very good quarterback. I forget what his name was. He was all shore, and he was also an all shore basketball player. He was an awesome kid. He was a little undersized, so good. I forget what his name was. Maybe it'll come to
Yeah. I
us.
don't, I don't remember.
But they had several very good receivers and good. They were just good, and I felt like, we could not compete with their speed. So I made a decision, okay, to take all their outside game away and their pass game away and let the quarterback run the ball inside.
Right.
Okay. So how did I do this? I invited Coach Ciccatelli. At first he didn't take advantage of it, because he didn't know what we were playing right away and probably was shocked.
I don't think it was Coach Ciccatelli. It was the guy that went to Asbury Park afterwards.
I don't know.
I'm not sure if it was Ciccatelli that year.
In 2011, I think
No,
I
it was the guy that I forget, Stolf Solfakanich.
Okay.
That's who it
Well,
was, I believe.
I thought it was Chickatelli, but whatever. So how did this look from the stands? So, there were
You were
times, depending on the formation, where I had my defensive ends come off the tackles and go on slots. And
right.
so we jam the slots, we jam the wideouts. So we play a 3-5-3. Or we played a 40 look with two defensive tackles and two inside linebackers.
I know.
Okay. So what are you going to do? I'm forcing you. I am dictating to you. You're going to run the ball inside. And so
Hmm.
they had two turnovers initially in the first quarter, and they said, we can't do this. So they had a fumble, okay, because, we were laying back in coverage and we stuck a kid and he fumbled it, okay.
Hmm.
And then we had an interception,
Hmm.
okay. So coach got out of that and he said, they're giving us the middle. He ran his kid 39 times, and I think he got 300 yards.
I know.
And
I
they
know.
had 4 yards a carry or 5 yards a carry. Okay.
Right.
And it was working. We went into the half, winning the game 14-7.
Hmm.
Okay. And, and we were on the verge, of scoring on our first drive. Okay. In the second half. And if we had gone up 21-7, then that game would have been over
Right.
because we were playing the perfect. He would have had to go to the air, and we were playing the perfect defense. He couldn't churn it out on the ground with his kid anymore. But unfortunately, we threw an interception,
Yeah.
going for the end zone. We threw an interception. They ran it back to the 50. Then they tied the game up 14-14. We ended up losing the game by a field goal, 24-21. Okay. And they went to the playoffs and we didn't.
Right.
So, I know that probably there's a lot of coaches up there going, what is he doing? Why is he
Hmm.
letting this kid, run the ball 300 yards up the middle, you're not me. You didn't evaluate their speed like I did.
Right.
We almost won that game. Okay. And so it worked the way I wanted it to work. So
Right. Yeah,
that,
there was a few instances of that. It was obviously playing those teams at Howell with the great quarterbacks where we completely
oh,
shut them down.
yeah,
Again, in another unorthodox defense that you ran where people are like, "What's he doing?" But it always worked, man. It always worked.
against, listen, against Coach Davies, his son, was a very good quarterback, but he didn't like to run.
Right.
He did not like to run.
Yep.
He wasn't a good runner and he didn't like to run.
I
You know,
remember that game. Sometimes you rushed two
two,
guys.
two
Two
guys,
guys.
two. We had 9 in coverage, two. And I'll never forget Mike Wagner.
Oh
You
my
know,
God.
Mike Wagner being exasperated, rushing the quarterback,
Yep.
being held up by 2 guys.
My God.
I never forget that. But yeah, I mean, it worked. I mean, we had guys all over the field. They liked to throw the ball in the hole. We had a guy in the
Yep.
hole. We had a guy everywhere. We had a guy everywhere. So he dropped
Yeah.
9, and I'm not the only knucklehead that did that. Okay, go back and watch the Super Bowl in 1990 when the Giants beat the Bills. Guess what? Belichick he rushed 2 and dropped
Right.
9.
Right.
Okay, and that may have been where I freaking came up with that. Okay, but go watch that. It's kind of cool. All right, let me get to a couple more here. So I'm gonna with Colts Neck. I have this one. This isn't funny, but I mean, he might find it funny. You might. But Anthony Gargiulo, Colts Neck. Anybody that knows him. Anthony was a special player not only because of his skill, but what he was able to do physically and mentally. A lot of A-backs, top rushers in the area. They also play a defensive position and they go both ways, but they typically play defensive back. Okay. Anthony was a big kid, so he went both ways. He played A back or tailback, got the ball almost all the time, and played defensive end
Right.
going up against the nastiest tight ends in our conference. Okay. So he was laying on people on defense and he was in the thick of it. So physically, it had to be so demanding on him, but he never said a word. Okay.
Amazing.
And would never ask to come out. This
I
kid.
know.
So I always remember, like, if there was a break, like we scored or something, or there was a quarter change, I don't know, whatever. So Anthony had this, or there was a special team, maybe he wasn't on, right? He'd be sitting there, like he did, with his hands usually folded across and just waiting to go back out. And I'd look and I'd say, and he'd look at me, he'd turn his head, look at me. And I go, Ant, you need a break? He goes, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And that's all he said his whole career. He never asked to come out once. He never said he needed water. And I asked him multiple times, "Are you sure?" He goes, "I'm good, coach. I'm
Mhm.
good." So I'll always have that. I want to thank him for that memory. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Incredible.
So another Colts neck memory. I'm going to do a little Homer thing here, but I think you'll like this. Is my we're going to talk about Abby, my daughter, actually was our place kicker, and we're going to have her on, and we're going to talk about that and how special that was, and and how she competed, and how it was to her, and and things like that. But I'm going to put her on my memory list because in the game, in the state semifinal game, to get us to the state final, to get us to the promised land, to get us to where we've been striving to get to. Okay, here we are playing Nottingham, and and they're a very good football team. They may have one or two losses. They had one kid that was going to Rutgers, a wide out. He was very
Hmm.
difficult to defend. He was big and fast. Okay,
Right.
we were doing a good job against him, but we had an injury in the secondary, if you remember, in the second half. Okay, and they started to come back. So we had a little bit of a lead. I forget what that lead was. Okay, but we scored 4 times. Okay, and Abby made in this tense environment all 4 of her extra points, and
Hmm.
she was under a tremendous rush each time. Okay, and the conditions weren't the best. Okay, but she made her extra points, and so why I remember this is because I can remember being nervous as they were getting closer, and I looked up at the scoreboard, and it was 28-19, and I just remembered that because she made her 4 extra points, they didn't have an ability to win the game.
Right.
Because if she missed those extra points, it would have been 24-19, and they were one big play away from winning this game and taking that away from us. But because my daughter, our player, one of the top kickers in the state that year, okay, in that moment, okay, for her teammates, she came through and gave us that cushion that we needed.
Well,
And I'll
yes,
never forget
Abby
that.
was awesome, and even for me, knowing her since birth, obviously, and always being around her, it was, it was awesome to be part of that. And I just want to piggyback what you're saying and discuss our culture at that time,
Yeah.
as a program. And, she competed for that job. She
Yes.
wasn't given that job because she was your son, and I've known her entire life.
Daughter. It's my daughter.
That's what I meant, sorry, your daughter. And there was no favoritism that she
No.
competed
Yeah.
for that job. And
She worked hard. She
I
worked hard.
remember, and I got to give our players credit, but it comes from us. Our players accepted her, protected her,
Yeah.
complimented her exactly like she was just one of us. And I'll never forget, before the season, I was getting interviewed about that, and they asked me about,
Yeah.
a female on the program. And
Yes.
the reporter was like, I think he was like confused. And he's like, "So coach, I'm paraphrasing because I remember what I said to him. He says, you have a girl kicker, and how does that, like, is that working out?"
Right.
And I was looked at him like, "What do you
Any
mean?
are
Is
there
it?"
any issues with that or
I'm
any
like, "What do you
problems?
what do you mean? Are there any issues?" I said, "No, there are no issues." I said, "My players know that our culture is our culture, and no one is gonna go against what we believe in."
Right.
I said, "So I have no concerns. Do you have any? I have no. Why would I have any concerns?"
Right.
And I think that that's another principle of our program. We are not only coaching our asses off X's and O's, we are teaching young men how to behave in society, to accept, to be able to accept one female who knocked out a previous kicker who was not bad, he was good, and competed for the job.
Yeah.
Like, I never even questioned that I would have any problems with the mix of a girl in our program. Like, it
Right.
never even crossed my mind.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I was shocked when he asked me that question. And I guess because, we were confident in what we preached to our players, and what our kids, the rules, and the way that these kids were going to act on a daily basis, that it never even crossed my mind that we were going to have an issue. Like,
Yeah.
I was shocked when he asked me the question,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. 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 So um, we're going to get to that.
Mhm.
we're going to have a whole podcast with her, and I'm going to
Yep.
really look forward to that. It's going to be a proud dad moment for me.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? So I'm going to share one last memory, then we can get into some other things. I know that,
Hmm.
we're past the first hour here.
Hmm.
Um, that, I want to just recognize the coach, for just being a good man, and a very empathetic coach. And
Absolutely.
this is Mr. Dan Duddy, Coach Duddy, who was a brick player, I believe. I think he played at Bricktown. He coached at Bricktown, and he went off on his own, and he was a very beloved coach. And we didn't know him. Okay, I knew of him, but I didn't know him. And we faced him the first time, our first year in Allentown in 1999, when
Right.
we struggled. The most struggle that we had. That was the most struggling year that we had out of all of our years. The first year,
Right.
and we were just outmatched week in, week out. And he had a very good. He was at Central Regional, and had a very good team and had a very good running back. And it wasn't a game. And they scored 49 points on us. And he did something that I'll never forget. We scored at the end of somewhere in the fourth quarter or something, and he had made a decision that enough was enough. And when we kicked the ball off, he instructed his running back, his receiver who received the kickoff, to down the ball.
Right.
And and we were confused for a second. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, what went
Hmm.
on? And again, there was only like a minute left in the game or something like that. But he didn't want to have his kids, score on us again at that point.
Hmm.
And I'll just never forget that moment. And he came almost apologetic, okay, across the field when it was over. He goes, "Coach," he goes, "I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do,
Right.
And we said, "Coach Duddy, thanks. We really appreciate it. You're a great guy."
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, to recognize him because, I think that that's great when that happens, and I think sometimes we need more of that.
I agree. I can remember being in the similar situation our 6-4 year at Colts Neck when we had to play New Brunswick in the consolations, which I hated. I
Yeah.
hated being blackmailed by the NJSIAA that you had to sign a piece of paper before the season that you're going to play a consolation game or they ban you from the playoffs the next year. Like that to me was blackmail. It drove me insane.
Yeah.
I never wanted to play consolation games. I was like, the season's over, the season's over. I have
Yeah.
no interest in extending the season. We're dealing with high school kids who, if you're in a consolation game, most of the time you're not very good. We happen to be really good that year and missed the playoffs by 2 power points in 2011. Yes, 2011. And I remember New Brunswick. I don't know how we got matched up with them. They were may have been 0 for a 1 win, and literally we ran the ball probably every play,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. And I remember apologizing to their coach after the game, that I'm just like, I'm sorry, coach. I mean, I didn't want to play this consolation game anyway. But I gave those players a lot of credit. They never quit. That New Brunswick team didn't quit. They were totally outmanned. But that's my point. Like we could have scored 70, but I don't think ever in our career did we ever score 50, even though we had opportunities and our
Yeah.
mentality was, why do you need to score 50?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to bring you to another point. There are coaches that want to score 50 and more. That's an ego thing. It's not my thing. I can remember at St. John Vianney my last year going, ironically, after our year at Homedale, I became the offensive coordinator at St. John Vianney and we were playing Homedale. And I'll never forget one of the players saying to me, Coach, we want to score 70. And I freaking went ballistic. I said, 70? What do you prove by scoring 70 against Homedale? I said, are you kidding me right now? Like that was the mentality
Yeah.
that they had. And we beat them, but we didn't score over 50.
Right.
Yeah, so I do appreciate other coaches doing that. But again, I do believe that that was another Coach Camaforo thing. I believe that they believe the same thing. Like we're
Yeah.
not going to embarrass teenagers. You get nothing out of it by embarrassing players.
No, you get nothing out of it. So, all right. So, listen, this was really fun for me to go down memory lane a little bit and some of these things that stick out to me, some of these experiences. But
Mhm. We're going to work on more. We're going to have some guests coming up, hopefully.
yeah,
And we're going to have some ex-players from our South days to coaches
yeah,
that coach with us.
I already
And
confirmed. Coach Andel's going to come on soon.
Yep.
I already confirmed
Awesome.
with him.
Yep.
And, so he'll be an upcoming
We have Coach Murphy.
broadcast.
Coach Murphy from Allentown is going to come
Coach
on.
Murphy. I was thinking about this. Maybe we can, and I think we'll get him. Maybe we can put something out on Instagram about questions, and we can
Yes.
have kids send us questions, and we can have answer the
Yes.
questions.
That's what I was thinking. And also coaches, I
Coaches,
think
sure.
geared maybe towards younger coaches, just some of our philosophy. Again, not saying we have it, what we do is the only way to do it, but we, I think, are in a unique situation where most coaches don't go through the struggles that we went through.
Well, and this is the reason, okay? Like a lot of coaches have taken over programs who have not been good for a few years, okay? We
Mhm.
get that. But Greg, I want to spend, a whole episode on the program building at Allentown, okay?
Right.
Because what you did there and me when I partnered with you is that we instituted a football culture where there had never been one. Okay.
Correct.
When you don't have a winning season in 40 years, okay, and only win 5 games in a decade,
Mhm.
and we'll go over this. And so, where do you even start there? So it's not like, well, this program has been good in the past, but the last 5 years they haven't done good. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to turn it around. Okay. Building something from scratch is different than turning it around. Do you know what I
Agreed.
mean? So
Yes.
yeah, we that's going to be a very interesting episode for
Well,
me, and we want to talk about that.
so
Okay.
we're going to regroup for our
Yep.
next episode. We'll discuss some topics that we feel are relevant, and we'd also like to extend, reach out to Coach in an Instagram comment or a private message in some of the things you guys want us to discuss, and
Yeah.
we'll be happy to do that.
We'll put something out about that, and we also just want to thank everyone that's been sending really nice comments, about
Right.
the podcast, and that they can't wait to listen to it, and we're really happy to be doing it. Coach and I are having a really great time doing this, and we're looking forward to more. All right,
I
so Coach,
am,
really good
I
talking
am,
to you today.
you too. I am dying to get into X's and O's, man. I'm dying to do it. But anyway,
Well, we'll have to figure out on Zoom here how to go to the board
yeah,
because we can do that, which would
I
be fun.
know. Awesome.
Okay.
All right,
All right,
Coach.
Coach.
Great
Good
job,
talking to
man.
you. All right,
Be
man.
well.
Talk to
See
you
you.
soon. Bye bye.